You've probably seen the headlines by now. Make America Healthy Again, MAHA, along with the United States government, are claiming a huge public health victory in that they're having Coca-Cola change the recipe from using high fructose corn syrup over to using real sugar with cane sugar. But is this actually a massive public health victory, or is this political showmanship? Let's dive into the facts of what is going on here. All right, so as I go through this, I'm going to be breaking this down into categories. We're going to be going with, first we need to define and find out what is high fructose corn syrup and what is cane sugar. We need to take a look at the cost, blood sugar changes, which leads us right into the health claims, sport performance, and other health impacts such as fatty liver disease and insulin sensitivity. So first of all, let's dive into what is high fructose corn syrup and what is cane sugar. They're both made up of the same two sugar molecules, those being fructose and glucose. Now they have a slightly different composition of the two. That being high fructose corn syrup is about 55% fructose and 45% glucose, while cane sugar as well as sucrose is 50% glucose and 50% fructose. Does that really make a big difference? It can, potentially, as we go through this. Now, where do you see these two differences in the recipe for Coca-Cola? One place, really, the United States of America. Mexico uses cane sugar, while Canada and the EU both use sucrose, what we commonly call table sugar, which comes from refining cane sugar for the most part. All right, so that leads us directly into our second category, the cost. Now, is there really a cost difference between high fructose corn syrup and cane sugar? In the United States of America, yes, there is. And the main reason behind that is the US government subsidizes the corn industry. So they actually provide funding to make it so that corn is much cheaper for whether it's going to be used in industrial processes or for food stuff, for livestock, or if it's going to be further refined and used for the food chain for humans. And high fructose corn syrup is highly refined or processed corn, so that it's been basically taken down until it's only a sugar or a carbohydrate liquid. So the government then makes it so that this is extremely cheap. That's going to cut into not just profits, but it's going to make the production much more expensive. And then when you, as I was previously saying, where high fructose corn syrup is already in a liquid form, now you're going to have to add an extra step where you've got to dissolve the granulated cane sugar into the Coca-Cola syrup, which now you've added productivity time, which then further increases the costs. And then also another factor to keep in mind is high fructose corn syrup's shelf life is actually longer than cane sugar. So if you've got something that has a longer, more stable shelf life, and you're looking to be mass producing vast quantities of a food product, this is only going to then make it so that you're able to have it on hand for longer, so your actual costs overall are still going to be lower. So those are a couple of the big reasons why in the 1980s Coca-Cola switched over from cane sugar in the United States to high fructose corn syrup. Their profit margins were starting to get eaten into very rapidly, and they were losing market share to their main competitor, Pepsi. So by cutting down on the production costs, by switching over to high fructose corn syrup, they were then able to have a little bit more margin, which then allows them to reinvest back into the company to make it so that they can fight back against having some of their market share being eaten away by their closest competitor. And in the vast majority of taste tests, the vast majority of humans can't actually tell the difference in flavor between the two. All right, so now let's start to dive into the actual health claims being made. Are they valid, or is it just political showmanship being done by the administration? First, we have to talk about blood sugar impact, which means we need to know a little bit about glycemic index. Glycemic index just tells you how much of a sugar load that is going to have on your bloodstream. And that depends a lot on how much glucose is being loaded in. So the proportion is going to have a massive impact on that. High fructose corn syrup has a glycemic index of about 58 to 65, whereas cane sugar is at about 65. That means that high fructose corn syrup is actually going to be a little less impactful on your actual glycemic index, so on the actual sugar load. The reason for that is slightly higher proportion of fructose. Fructose takes a little bit longer before it actually enters your bloodstream. The reason for that is glucose is what our body actually uses as a sugar. Fructose, on the other hand, actually has to be, first, it has to be digested. Then it has to go to our liver and then be converted into glucose, which it then can enter our bloodstream. So that's one of the reasons why, although they both are giving you the same amount in terms of grams of sugar, it's a little bit slower acting from the high fructose corn syrup. Is this actually a good thing? No, not really. They're basically comparable. You're talking about a very small difference. And that very small difference doesn't really have that much impact. Yes, the high fructose corn syrup is going to have a slightly lower spike in blood glucose levels, but it's going to then extend the length of that spike. So just remember a couple years ago, the whole flatten the curve thing. That's what's kind of happening when it comes to cane sugar versus high fructose corn syrup. And all of this is compared to if you're just ingesting straight glucose, which has a glycemic index of 100. So because there's fructose in each of these, it brings the glycemic index down significantly for both, and they're still only within like 5% of one another. So what other health claims are being made between the two? Well, one of the big ones is that cane sugar gets this label of being natural, whereas high fructose corn syrup, it gets the claim of being labeled as processed. Here's the blunt truth. They are both highly processed foodstuffs. It's just high fructose corn syrup is extremely highly processed and comes in a liquid form, whereas and it needs more of an industrial process in order to get there. But cane sugar, on the other hand, you're just basically taking the sugar cane and you're squeezing out all the liquid and then drying it out so that it becomes granulated sugar. It becomes sucrose at the end of the day. Other health claims that are being made between the two, guess what? When you control for the amount coming in, a single can of Coca-Cola has 39 grams of sugar. It doesn't matter which one is coming from, whether it's coming from cane sugar or it's coming from high fructose corn syrup. They're both giving you 39 grams of sugar at the end of the day. Which means any link to obesity, they're going to be in a virtual tie. Neither of them's coming out ahead on that. If it comes to liver metabolism, okay, you're taking a look at a 2 to 5% difference between the two. Is that really going to be statistically significant in terms of long-term impacts? No, not really. Our livers are extremely strong. However, there is a slight, and I mean a slight, chance that high fructose corn syrup may worsen fatty liver risk. But it is still not conclusive on that. The research is still out on that. It is not conclusive on does high fructose corn syrup have a worse effect on or outcome for causing fatty liver disease. That has not been proven yet, and in fact, they're in a virtual tie so far. When we take a look at things like addictiveness to sugar, which some people do have, they both hit the same reward pathway of causing the serotonin release in the brain. So no, it doesn't. There isn't any statistical difference between the two. Dental health, guess what? They both cause dental caries, which means a cavity. They both have the same impact on that. So we're still taking a look, and they're basically in a statistical tie. When we take a look at appetite hormones, leptin and ghrelin, fructose bypasses your actual hunger and insulin response ever so slightly, which means that high fructose corn syrup may have a possibly higher disruptive impact on hunger. But since how you're drinking both, you're really not going to get that satiety that you get from food. So as you're drinking it, it's still just going to come in and be absorbed very rapidly and very easily. That's why one of the things I always tell people is liquid calories are what hold people back in terms of any kind of health change they want to make. So this means we also have to take a look at the insulin sensitivity profile of both. Guess what? Again, it's a statistical tie. Neither of them is better than the other, because when you take a look at how much you're taking in from a single serving of Coca-Cola, it is still 39 grams. and both are going to still have the same overall impact on your body's intake of sugar. So while high fructose corn syrup may reduce insulin sensitivity, what this means is that your body now needs to use more insulin for the same amount of glucose coming in to reduce your blood glucose levels. It is basically the exact same as cane sugar. If you consume either of them in large quantities in a chronic fashion, which means you're doing a lot, and even more as you gain fat mass and you become closer and closer to overweight and obese, the impacts are always going to be compoundingly negative for you. So neither of them is really better than the other. The perception of natural versus processed is also BS because they're both processed and they both come from a natural source. Now let's take a quick look at sport performance. Because hey, you come here for a little bit of sport performance information. Both of them are essentially, yet again, a statistical tie. High fructose corn syrup can be used for quick energy due to its rapid absorption of free glucose and fructose, whereas cane sugar also can be used for the exact same thing. That small little 5% difference in the amount of glucose versus fructose in its composition makes no real difference. As well, they're both going to be taken up into your bloodstream at almost the same rate, which means that they're used for staying at a high output of physical activity for a prolonged period of time is going to be essentially the same. The only difference that really comes down to it is your preference. That's the God's honest truth when it comes to these two. There isn't really any difference between them. In a randomized controlled trial by Stanhope and colleagues in 2021, which was funded by the National Institute of Health, they found that in the study with 75 adults consuming sugar-sweetened beverages with either sucrose, which is basically cane sugar, or high fructose corn syrup, what they found was that there was no statistical significance between the two groups in terms of liver fat, circulating lipids, uric acid, reduced insulin sensitivity, or other biomarkers. As well as another study by a systemic review actually by Lee and colleagues found that there was no difference in weight, BMI, lipid profile, blood pressure, or fasting glucose. The only difference that they found was a very, very small difference in C-reactive protein, which is a marker of inflammation. Now that might be one avenue where they need more research on. However, in the vast majority of research, there has been shown to be no real statistical difference in terms of health outcomes and biomarkers between high fructose corn syrup and cane sugar, especially when you equate them for calories or grams. If you're getting 39 grams from either source, it's going to give you the same long-term outcome as the other. So after all this, is the MAHA-driven push and all the hype by Donald in the media really worth the hype of what they've been saying? Based on the research, we can pretty much at this point definitively say, no, it's not worth the hype. All it's really going to do is empty your pockets of a little extra cash because it's going to cause the costs and the price of Coca-Cola products to actually go up. Now, that might lead to a benefit of less people drinking it or people drinking less, which then means that they're going to be consuming one, less calories, and two, having less of an insulin dose response to having ingestion of 39 grams of calories per serving. This would be a net benefit. It's something that in the UK, I know that they're doing already is beverages that have high sugar contents cost a little bit more. It's almost like a sugar tax that's been put on them. But is it the public health victory that MAHA has claimed and Bobby Kennedy Jr. is all behind? No, it's not. Let's be honest. It really isn't worth the hype. It's just going to make things more expensive without actually having any actual benefit. Tell me what your thoughts are by leaving a comment below. And in the meantime, if you like the content that I've put out with this and you've gotten value from it, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Coach Tony, Wrestling Podium Performance. Remember to go embrace your potential.